I'm always fascinated, though, by editors sometimes have a better eye in their own homes because they edit, whereas designers are magpies.
Although I'm sort of like that. My husband calls
You
me
are?
queen of the knickknacks because I have
Oh
so
my-
many beloved little, objects.
That's kind of an amazing title to have.
Yeah, I know. It's a pretty funny, good one that I can't quite let go of.
Welcome to Talk Shop. I'm Ariel Okin, a New York-based interior designer, writer, and editor looking to bring a little bit of magic into our homes every day. After years as a writer and editor in the interiors world, I founded my own editorial site, Fenimore Lane, in 2020, and the Talk Shop interview series was born. Each week, I delve into the personal experiences of the top interior designers and tastemakers around the globe. This week, my guest is my friend, Madeleine Luckel, a senior design editor at Architectural Digest, where she covers national and international design, including overseeing web-exclusive home tours and an archive-focused newsletter. Along with being one of the loveliest people I know, Madeleine holds an encyclopedic knowledge of fashion and textiles that rivals any historian. With a Master of Arts in Costume Studies from NYU and a BA in Classics from Brown, Madeleine has previously worked at Vogue and Vogue.com, where she covered a variety of design-related topics, and which is where she and I met as contributing writers. Madeleine has contributed book chapters to food and fashion and storytelling in luxury fashion, brands, visual cultures, and technologies. I love Madeleine's sense of style and joie de vivre, and can't wait to delve into her career path and more. So please join me as I welcome Madeleine to the podcast. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so happy to have you on. This is like such a delight to get to talk to you on the podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I've, enjoyed so much getting to speak with you over the years. So it's great to get to do it again.
Well, to kick off the conversation, we have been asking everybody, can you describe your style in 3 words or less?
Colorful, pattern-filled, and inclusive.
Oh, I love that. And it's so true. I feel like you do have like such a range and like eclecticism to what you are drawn to. And for those who may not know, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are at this point in your life right now and what you're doing at AD?
So yeah, I'll start with maybe my current work, but happy to talk about my background as well. I'm a senior design editor at Architectural Digest. So I am the person who oversees the web exclusive home tours. So I get all those pitches from interior designers and from other individuals, and I go through them all, and we have a weekly meeting to look at them all. And then I, am also the person sort of overseeing those articles from start to finish. And of course, I'm the one editing them. So it's a great way to get to see different design work, of course, interior design, but also architecture. And you think about what's filling these homes in terms of craft and design, in terms of, ceramics and textiles and whatnot. And, I just love that we get to cover a variety of styles. I think AD, is really, it's not like we're looking for only traditional or only modern. We're really looking for things that are just exceptional and, make us pause.
Yeah, you guys really get to run the gamut with what you see too, which is it must be so exciting to be able to like sift through all of these submissions and get to see all of the different types of homes that you get sent your way.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's so great, in different places from different people. It's really great. And so that's, probably the main focus of my job. But, I'm also involved with AD Pro, which is, our sort of digital vertical that's focused on the design community. And I actually started off
for designers.
Yes. And now we very excitingly have the directory, which I know you're a member of, Ariel, which is, also such an exciting community to be a part of. So, any interior designers or architects listening, I encourage you to look it up and apply to join.
The directory is wonderful. We actually got a client through the directory.
Oh, that's so great. Yes.
Yeah.
So for those who maybe don't know, it's something where you can apply to be listed through this AD official directory online. And so clients can search by location and by professional type to sort of find you and then hire you. But it's also this great community, and we're all really involved with, supporting these designers. We had a great event last night too, where we got to meet more people and people got to miss each other.
I was so sad to miss that.
We missed you, but it's okay. There'll be more, I'm sure.
So you work on so many different things at AD, and you like from the edit side, from the directory side, and then also from AD Pro. But your career has taken such a span. You've worked at Vogue, you've interned at amazing institutions like the Met and the RISD Museum and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Can you kind of walk us through your career so far? Because every time I get to see you, I'm always just so blown away by how much you've done in such a short time and also how much you've seen and absorbed and how you've kind of honed your eye over the past, decade.
Too nice. And, I feel the same about you. You're so
Thank you.
prolific and, have your hand in so many interesting things. But I guess I'll maybe start with interning at the RISD Museum, which I did during college. I went to Brown, so I was in Providence, right up the hill from RISD, which is, such an amazing art school. And so I interned in the costume and textile department my senior year. And so, this was a great experience getting to see and be around all these objects that hinged on textiles. And I had come off interning for the summer in between my junior and senior year at Vogue, which of course I'd loved. So then, that was a great experience for me. And I'd always loved art and studio art and art history, but it was sort of, a chance for me to focus in and think on what are some of my more core interests. And then after I graduated college, I got a job at Vogue, the features assistant. So I was working at the time for Eve McSweeney, who was the features director of the magazine, and Taylor Antrim, who's currently the deputy editor of the magazine, but was at the time a senior editor. And that was, a really great experience. I'd grown up loving Vogue and been, really inspired by the magazine and its images. And so part of this job, was, of course, assistant work and booking travel for some of the amazing writers, but I also got to edit the letters from readers section and table of contents and look up and make one sheets on individuals that my managers wanted to pitch and sort of do like a first draft of headlines and other display text.
And that was right out of college?
Yes.
I mean, what an amazing opportunity. You graduate Brown and you go to Vogue. That's like such an incredible progression.
Yes.
So I think you and I interned. I was at Teen Vogue, I think the same year you were at Vogue as an intern.
Okay. Oh, we should have met then. I wish we had.
I know.
Yeah.
So what an amazing experience. So you moved to the city, you're at Vogue. Did you always know you wanted to go into editorial, or how did writing sort of fit into your story?
I think I always wanted to work at Vogue. It's like my interests were like Vogue and, like art history related things and some other topics. Like I took international relations classes in college and I actually majored in classics. So I did a lot of Latin translating.
I love that.
So I was drawn to Vogue, and my internship was actually in the beauty department. So I worked under Sarah Brown, who was for many years the beauty director. And, she was really great to get to know. And I think she sort of, saw a certain work ethic in me. And the internship program, it wasn't something like maybe consulting or you get an automatic job offer at the end of it. It was more that I kept in touch with her, and she was, very supportive and ultimately introduced me my senior year of college to Taylor. And then, I graduated. I didn't have the job then yet, and I was actually interning in DC. And then Taylor's former assistant left, so I got called in to interview. So I started sort of the August after I graduated.
I feel like that's such a good lesson also for people who are listening who might still be in school. Just the importance of staying in touch with the people that you intern for and kind of establishing those mentorship relationships early on, because you never know where it will take you and how much you'll learn from them also.
Absolutely.
And I want to talk a bit also about your experience in costume institutes as well, because you have an encyclopedic knowledge of fashion history and the decorative arts, which is so interesting from an interiors perspective because it really does translate. So how did you decide to shift from Vogue into interiors and end up at AD?
So yeah, I mean, I loved working at Vogue, and at some point I transitioned to being the living writer for Vogue.com. And the living editor, Virginia Van Zanten, was just, really open and welcoming to my pitches. She was, sort of this wonderful mentor who really, let me see the hope in myself and wrote lovely emails and, created this environment which I could frequently contribute. And so ultimately a job opened up being the living writer at Vogue.com. So I transitioned within Vogue to that role. And of course, the living section covers many topics that are sort of similar to lifestyle topics, but the one that resonated most with me was design. So I guess that was, certainly a point when I was starting to percolate, but at the same time, in light of my background interning at the RISD Museum and the Costume and Textiles Department, I was also, thinking of getting a master's. And I did ultimately do a master's at NYU in their Costume Studies program.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was sort of, an art history program, but it's more focused on the history of textiles and fashion.
So cool.
It was a full-time program, but since I was in New York, sort of serendipitously, the first semester I was still part-time at Vogue. And then, that was a fair amount of work. And then after that, the next 2 semesters, I was, freelancing and still writing the same type of articles, but on a contributing basis to the living section. But that period also gave me time to intern at, many amazing museums in the curatorial departments in terms of costume and textiles.
I feel like so much of that love for the decorative arts and fashion and clothing comes from partially like your childhood and how interested you were in it growing up and how it kind of fit into your life in that way. And usually the through line is there from like a really young age.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I would say that I was always interested in, sort of the visual world and grew up doing tons of art and craft classes. And I mean, I think too, even though I wouldn't say my parents, work in creative fields or design per se, I think they were always just really completely open and welcoming to what my innate interests were. And they were very supportive of that. They would have, never made me feel bad about my core interests. And I think that they would have thought that that would have been, sort of a terrible thing to do in a sense. So I think having that sort of supportive environment was also key in terms of my interests getting to grow and develop further.
I think that's so important also. My mom was the same way, and my dad. I was terrible at math. I always gravitated toward the arts. And I think I wouldn't be who I am or have ended up in the career that I did without them fostering the love of it for me. Like they saw that it was something that I was interested in and they let me run with it. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. But yeah, I grew up doing, I did quilting camp from first grade on.
Oh my God, I love that.
Which is really fun, and I
went to art camp every summer.
Yeah, it was great. It was such a good experience. And, I did lots of ceramics, which in the East Bay where I'm from have, sort of an interesting and long history and, whether it's throwing on the wheel or painting ceramics. And then in middle and high school, I started to do, more sort of intensive weekend classes and summer programs at California College of the Arts, which is in the Bay Area, and then ultimately at RISD, sort of the summer before my senior year of high school. So that was, all wonderful experiences. And I didn't apply to art schools, but I applied to college with sort of the supplemental art portfolio of my work and then continued taking art classes in college.
I did the same thing. I did a lot of photography leading up. And then when I applied to college, I applied with like a photo portfolio. And looking back, I never thought about interior design as a career. I actually wanted to go into fashion, but the crossover is really there. And so many people kind of have traversed between both, I feel like.
Completely. And I think for me, in terms of, from Vogue to Architectural Digest, textiles were really a uniting thread.
Totally.
You see those, of course, in fashion and garments and also in, decorative arts, design, whether it's current design or design history. And there's so many, spectacular works across time and place that have, wonderful stories to tell. So I think starting to unravel that and think more about that was an important phase for me too in that transition.
What do you think your favorite thing about working for AD is?
I really do think it's such a great community. And, that starts at the top. Amy Astley is our editor-in-chief, and she's such a amazing leader, and she has such a warm and welcoming mentality. And
she's so kind.
Yeah, she just sets, a great tone for our office environment and sort of the broader AD community that she builds.
I remember when I was interning at Teen Vogue, I was in the elevator with her, and I was like 18, 19, and I was so freaked out, and she could not have been kinder. And then years later, when I was already working in design, I saw her at one of the like antique fairs, and I went up to her and I was like, it was like my dream to work at Teen Vogue, and I was in the elevator with you, and I became mute, but I always wanted to tell you how amazing and kind you were. And she just could not have been more gracious or warm. I think she's such a real person and has none of the, editorial gets a bad rep for can be, a clubby environment. And she's just so nice.
Yeah. And that's so true. And it's so genuine. And it's so across the board. And I think it's, one of the great things about people, like yourself, who are also now members of the directory. You sort of get to have these great interactions with, the AD team.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, part of the directory, for those who are listening, that you get to do, not only being listed in the directory, but you get to go to certain events, and a lot of AD editors are there. And then you also get to go to different showroom openings and different brands. So it really does create a community around design, which I think is really special.
Absolutely.
Are there any stories or articles that you are particularly proud of, or ones that you're just stick in your mind?
That's a great question. I mean, in terms of, my current work at AD and the different interior design projects I get to cover, I won't pick a favorite. These are all wonderful in their own ways. Yes, exactly. It's really too hard. I guess I'll, highlight one that comes to mind. But it was designed by Jessica Jubileer, and it was in Wisconsin.
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
Yes. And I, hadn't been exposed to Jessica and her work yet, but it was just such a phenomenal introduction to what she does and what she's capable of. And, I think my favorite room in that home, it had this amazing, beautiful floral wallpaper. But then at the top, at the ceiling, there was sort of this cupola tiled structure. So just that combination of different decorative elements when you have like the wallpaper and the tile coming together. And also in this bedroom environment where we don't often think of a material like tile coming together. It was just so creative, and it felt different, and it felt like this wow moment.
I was listening to Amy on Jake's new podcast, the Expert Podcast, and she was saying that oftentimes people will ask her, like, why do you guys pick the certain things that you pick, and how do you choose? And she was saying that it's about things being different and interesting, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a place that everybody would want to live in, but it's something that has, a history behind it, or a soul that really translates through the imagery. And I think that's what you guys do really well, is you pick things that are a little quirky or a little off or a little different, and then it gets mixed in with more of like the celebrity stuff and XYZ, but it's really rounded out in a way that kind of exposes people to things that they wouldn't see otherwise.
Absolutely. And I think there does have to be, that mix or that rhythm, in my section and the print magazine. And that is, I think you're right, it keeps it really interesting. If it was only ever things that we thought that, the most number of people would say, oh, I want to live in that home, that, ultimately wouldn't be that interesting over time or as compelling.
Right. And it doesn't push people's boundaries in terms of getting them to kind of expand their thinking on what interiors could look like potentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're so right in saying that, that we, hopefully people getting to see the work that we highlight and publish, kind of stimulates a certain amount of creative thinking on their end as well.
Totally. I mean, that project that you mentioned in Wisconsin is a great example. It was so unique, and I think kind of broke Instagram for a second, because it was so cool and so different, and really stood out to me as something that like I hadn't seen.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good lens that people kind of are always asking, what are you looking for? It's like there isn't one hard and fast rule. It's just things that are really interesting.
Completely.
Speaking of rules, is there a design rule that you kind of always follow, or do you think they're kind of all made to be broken?
That's a good question. I don't think I follow a rule. I mean, there's certain things, and again, I'm not a professional designer, interior designer, architect, any of that.
But you do have an amazing eye.
Thank you. Too nice. But, I think there's some little things like you wouldn't want the area rug in a room to be too small in proportion to the furniture, or,
right.
If you're hanging something on the wall, whether it's art or something else, you want to keep in mind, the scale of that piece and how it fills the wall, if it's a horizontal work on a vertical wall, stuff like that. But no, I wouldn't say I'm big on rules or that I have things that I follow. I think I'm drawn to objects and pieces of design that I like. And I personally, just in terms of my own normal apartment, I feel pretty strongly of like, yes, no, maybe, in terms of stuff I see.
I think that's the best way to be, though. Because I think it's like that old Billy Baldwin quote, buy what you love because it'll never go out of style.
Yes, exactly. And it's so true.
And it helps you cultivate your own personal style.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, growing up, I grew up in Berkeley, so the Bay Area and Northern California. And there were so many interesting little small businesses that were these great design stores, not
Yeah.
interior designers, front facing shops, but just selling, sort of amazing, also just little doodads and baubles and creative things that you didn't necessarily need. But I think, just sort of poking around those spaces, my mom almost is like a form of visual entertainment was influential, informative to me.
Yeah. I think that stuff sticks with you. It's like the little things that you don't even realize as a kid, the way that your mom, suggests killing 30 minutes of time with you by like popping into a shop where you're looking at ceramics and kind of like handmade things, like that follows you throughout your life and kind of shapes who you become.
Exactly. And it's not about, shopping or buying. And I think often people can conflate that, one with the other. But, it's sort of about seeing visual information. And also,
Yeah.
when we grew up, it was not as much of an internet era by any means. So, to have access, to seeing objects in person was stimulating.
I know. I feel like we're also inundated with just photography and in general visual overload because we see so much all day that it's kind of nice to like go into a physical store and actually touch and feel and actually get to see what the texture is. And I'm happy that retail seems to be coming back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like for me now, that's really important to maintain because I'm covering interiors, but the way that I'm getting these pitches through photographs, so to sort of maintain a sense of seeing things is really important.
I mean, speaking of, this is something you and I have talked about a lot. And I think designers in general are always unsure of what should good photography look like and what do editors look for when they're, accepting pitches, and how do you kind of think about all of that? Because you see more photography than anybody every day.
Well, I guess I'll start off by saying, I'm not a photo editor and I work with photo editors who could,
Yes.
Better speak on this topic and like their, career-long expertise. But certainly, there's certain basic framing techniques to interior photography versus other photography, getting the points of perspective that, if a photograph didn't have that, that would be notable. A certain amount of natural light as opposed to a filter or preset that,
Yeah.
is very striking or different. And, I think at least for us, we're really looking for full rooms. We're not looking so much for vignettes. Vignettes are included, though, more on Clever. So just kind of like wide shots showing things. Certainly there's a wide range of styling techniques, and that's fine. Bringing in fresh florals is always nice, but not required. But yeah, and then I guess I would also add, many people pitch to me and to AD their interior design residential projects that are professionally shot. You can also pitch, with scouting images, and that's okay. And it's more, what I'm looking for to see.
For the first
yes,
time.
Yeah. And what I'm looking for is I really just want to see all the rooms and all the areas. I'm not covering projects that don't have a kitchen or don't have the bathrooms, and we really just want to get a sense of the entire space or property.
Right. I think that's a really big takeaway for people is like pitching the whole story. And
yeah,
there might be one or two rooms that are the highlight or the standout, but you have to give the full story because ultimately it becomes a story and it's something that's written up the through line of who lives there and what's the story behind the house and how did they, what was the process like with the designer and the client and all of that. So thinking about when you're pitching from a story angle, I think is helpful.
Absolutely. And, it's not like we'll run all 100 photos that the your photographer is taking. We have to make an edit too. But, it's just great to get this 360 view to get a real sense of the space.
Totally. Personally, what do you think your home says about you?
Well, I will say, once again, I'm not an interior designer, so it's, a normal home.
I'm always fascinated, though, by editors sometimes have a better eye in their own homes because they edit, whereas designers are magpies and stylists too. Like we kind of just like accumulate so many things and then it gets like crazy.
Although I'm sort of like that. My husband calls me queen of the knickknacks because I have so many beloved little, objects.
That's kind of an amazing title to have.
Yeah, I know. It's a pretty funny, good one that I can't quite let go of. But yeah, no, I mean, I think my home is sort of like an assemblage of objects I love and that, speak about, my experiences and influences over the year, whether it's trips or, different fabrics I've been drawn to. And, certainly there's color and light and, things that personally resonate and that have memories associated with them. I have a lot of, art and design and fashion books.
I know, me too. I hoard them.
But it's great, and so you can really refer back, if you were wondering about something and flip through and be inspired or look something up. I think, they function, yes, as objects of decor in a home, but it's a helpful tool too.
Absolutely. That's something that we've been talking a lot about this whole season with people is the importance of understanding the history of design. And the best way that you can learn to do that is by reading all of these amazing interiors books. There are so many and so many amazing ones that are out of print that you can get vintage on Etsy or on eBay or Amazon. But the best way to kind of expand your knowledge of the industry is really just to read as much as you can.
Yeah, and to look and to keep your eye open. And, there's that great, I said, maybe a Diana Vreeland quote of like, the eye has to travel. You kind of have to train and hone your eye by keeping it stimulated.
And that Grace Coddington scene in September issue where she's looking out the window talking about never to close your eyes when you're traveling.
Completely.
What do you think the 3 biggest influences on your aesthetic in your life have been?
I think, probably the little local design shops in Berkeley, which I still love to go to, the ones that are still there when I visit. That's definitely one. I guess I would say like another one really was, in grad school and in curatorial museum internships, learning about textiles. And that's something I continue to come back to. For example, I think we see now that there are these tapestries that are sort of verdure or fleur that are popular to hang up in contemporary homes. One example is the Giancarlo Valle and Jane Keltner de Valle beautiful home that we just had on our cover. And you see that in a bedroom. But tapestries, I mean, they're such like richly layered creations. They're, historically, they were so valuable. They were much more valuable in the medieval and Renaissance period than a painting, even if we might not think about that today. And that really went back to, the fiber involved, the value in the fiber, the dye, the gold that was woven through, and the amount of labor it took. It takes so much labor to weave a textile, especially a tapestry.
Right. I mean, they're so detail oriented and they're huge.
Yes. But they were almost like, you could almost like store monetary worth in textiles of that value.
Interesting.
And also, when you think about how they were used, maybe in Italy, a warmer climate, there's more frescoes, but in Northern Europe, tapestries also have this function for that climate and for the fact that there were these itinerant royal courts, moving around from place to place. Well, a tapestry or a textile is something that you can roll up and bring with you. It's portable. And then you can hang it up.
It retains heat too.
Yes. And you can hang it up as a backdrop and it carries with it this sense or, ability to communicate wealth and power because people know just how valuable these pieces are. So just I would say learning stuff like that and learning more about textiles.
That, by the way, is why I love talking to you because you have such a wealth of knowledge. It's so cool. And what you've studied, I mean, doing the master's and what you got your master's in is just so interesting as a designer because it's directly applicable. The history of it is directly applicable to what we do.
Yes. Okay. And then I have a third one. My third one, I'll say, was probably, this sounds kind of nerdy, but translating Latin, which I took Latin, which I took Latin in high school. And then I actually majored in classics. And so I constantly in these Latin classes doing translations. But I really think, that since my job is editing and writing based, translating Latin is what kind of taught me how to learn to love reading.
That's so beautiful. I love that.
Oh yeah, but it's really true because it was, in high school, the translations I was doing, it was such an incredibly layered text. It was, you're trying to puzzle out the Latin and in Latin word order is not connote meaning the same way it would in English. So, it's this logic puzzle. But then there's all these rhetorical devices. You're reading Cicero. There's also all these, references to the history that you have to get and look up in the footnotes, references to religion. Yeah. And religious, studies get brought in too in terms of the culture and time and place. And then most of the Latin you're reading, it's actually poetry, which is wonderful to think about, but it also then comes with a meter. And so there's this musical quality, and in kind of figuring out the meter of the lines, you can kind of see more about, the long and short marks of any word, which helps you to do your translation. And then of course there's the overarching story itself. So it's such a layered document. And I think, it taught me, to love reading on that level and think of reading in that way. But also I think that's what I love about, textiles and interior design, is that those two are often such layered creations with so much to unpack.
That is such a beautiful metaphor for interiors.
Thank you.
That seriously was so beautiful. It's so true though, because if you think about interiors as not only, they're beautiful, but it's also a layered history of who's the client and what did the designer put their personal history into what they're selecting, and the history behind, some of the provenance of the antiques or the textiles that are being brought in. It is a bit of a puzzle and a bit of a song and dance. And so that metaphor is so spot on. I love that.
Thank you.
Well, at the end, we kind of get into some little rapid fire questions, which pretty much are not interior design related at all. But I think that they always kind of trickle into interiors, and you kind of get a better sense of who people are holistically. So we asked 10. So what is your favorite food?
Polenta.
Oh my God. I love that. I mean, polenta is like one of the coziest foods out there, I think.
It is. It's so good. It's the ultimate comfort food in Italian. It's delicious.
I love a baked potato, and Jake Arnold also admitted that he loves a baked potato, and I was like laughing because it's like such a comfort food and so random. So polenta also is up there on my favorite answers now.
Totally.
Favorite drink?
Okay, this is so boring, but I do think I love water, and that's what I drink the most.
There's nothing better than I love ice cold water with ice cubes.
Yeah. And I do I need a morning coffee, I admit, and I have an espresso machine that I use.
I can't. So I recently have had to stop drinking coffee because I have terrible reflux, like a 90-year-old man. And I can't function.
Ah, yeah.
I didn't realize how much I needed it until I stopped having coffee.
Yeah. No, I can't imagine. I'm very sorry.
Favorite film? And I'm curious because I feel like you will come at this from a set perspective.
Okay. I should, but honestly, my immediate reaction is not design related at all. Or
what is it? I want to know.
My Best Friend's Wedding is definitely my favorite movie. So good.
That's my sister's favorite movie too. It's so good.
It's so good. And I really think, it's not only in that era having a romantic comedy that doesn't have the classic happy ending, but having this female anti-hero who shows, a full range of flawed, very human personality. Yeah. It really was unique at the time. And, I know other people love that movie, but I don't think it gets quite enough credit for that part of it.
Yeah, 100%.
Name something else at that time that did that. I can't think of another example.
I know. I feel that way about Baby Boom. I feel like Baby Boom didn't get enough credit at the time for how subversive, no one was talking about, working mom having it all, and Diane Keaton was on the poster with a briefcase and a suit and holding a baby in a diaper. That was subversive for then.
Yeah.
Favorite bedding? That's a question I love to ask because people in our industry, I think, are so particular about it.
Okay. Well, the bedding I have right now that I love is Liberty of London. I love Liberty of London.
I love Liberty.
And, that textiles. And I went once to sort of their archive and design studio, which was amazing.
That is so cool.
Yes. But so this bedding, these sheets are made actually by J. Crew. And it's kind of there's some sort of...
I've seen those.
Yes. And it's these recycled fibers and that kind of tie into Liberty's mission. So they're also, have a certain...
Are they soft?
Yeah, yes, they are. And they're cotton and they don't get too hot or anything is what I would say.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Tea or coffee, and how do you take it?
Coffee, which I guess I've already said. But yeah, I have an espresso machine. So I would use 1 or 2 pods. And then honestly, I just do a dash of milk in it. And then that makes it the perfect temperature. Like I don't steam the milk, but then it's not too hot. And I never do sugar. If I was ordering coffee somewhere, I would order an iced latte.
Yeah. I love everything about coffee. I love the ritual. I love the smell. I love adding creamer to it. It's like a whole experience.
Yeah.
Favorite playlist?
I actually I'm so not knowledgeable about music.
I'm
My
not
friends
either.
and my husband make fun of me.
My team makes fun of me. The other day, something was on. Oh, they were playing Harry Styles, and I was like, "Is this the Jonas Brothers?" And they were like crying, laughing at me.
So yeah, when I exercise, I listen to music, but it's sort of, random when I have access to it at any point in time. I love if I was at a wedding and there's great dance music playing. I love that. And I, respond very happily to music.
Favorite weekend activity?
I get, since I live in New York City, I would say going to a museum and seeing a current exhibition.
Yeah. Is there anything on right now that you are really excited about seeing?
Certainly I really want to see Manet Degas at the Met.
Yes.
I think that's, going to be like a must view for everyone. And I just read this great biography on Berthe Morisot, who was, one of the only female impressionists. And she was married to Manet's brother. And then she and Degas were part of, the official impressionist circle. And he did portraits of her. So I'm, in light of that, I feel like I've learned a little bit more about those two artists.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to learn more.
What's the book called?
It's called Berthe Morisot, a biography, and it's by Anne Higonnet, who's a professor. But it was very good, and it's very inspiring of, the story of this amazing woman at a time and place where, women weren't artists and didn't, necessarily work in that capacity, and her just sort of forging her own path and being just completely 110% committed to her art. And then I'll also add, just if I could add like a exhibition I just saw, the Bard Graduate Center, which is actually located on the Upper West Side, has, amazing exhibitions about design, fashion, material culture. So I would always encourage people to look up, what's on view for them. And right now it's Sightlines, which the subtitle is On Peace, Powers, and Prestige, Metal Arts in Africa. And it's just a really great, exhibition in terms of course, the objects included and the information, but also the exhibition design in terms of, what they're pairing with what was really great to get to see.
That's so interesting. I've never been there.
Yeah, you have to go. They have the best things.
That is so cool. Definitely on. I see every time I talk to you, I learn something new. Favorite design book is the last question that I always like to end on because I think it's really hard to ask people in our industry.
Okay. Well, I know this is going to seem biased, but it probably is AD at 100, which working at AD when it was our 100th anniversary, Amy and many of my other colleagues had, put this together. And it's such a special almost document. It's beautiful to flip through, but you can learn so much. And one of my favorite parts about working at AD and AD Pro has also been getting to experience more of our archive, which is over 100 years. It's digitized. It's beautiful. It's highly searchable.
It's very cool.
Yes. If you subscribe to AD Pro, you have full access to that, to search, which of course I think is so valuable for design professionals. And I've liked writing articles and I have a newsletter tied to the archive, but this book is really a wonderful resource and also just really fun to get to flip through.
It's a great deep dive. I also love your AD Pro archive newsletter because you get to see these stories that kind of like you would never get to see them otherwise unless you're like hunting down a specific out of print issue.
Completely. Yeah. And it's so fun for me to get to do to just, take a little time to, find these hidden gems in the archive and try to resurface them and think too, what would our audience be most interested in seeing?
I feel like that's so it like perfectly encapsulates the best parts of your job and what you're interested in because it's the history plus, picking the through line to create a story about some type of trend or story around decoration in some way.
Absolutely.
Well, a few final words before we stop because I'm sad to stop talking because I love chatting with you.
Same.
Do you have any advice for someone looking to define their own interior style?
I think I would say stay true to yourself and focus in on what inspires you and kind of keep digging when you like something and you see something that sparks creative interest in you, follow up and look at more things, actually look at the footnotes in the book that you're reading and see where that leads you. And I also, I really do think that the directory is an incredible resources for all designers, including emerging designers, to get to be part of this community and learn more and be connected to AD.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the events alone are so worth going to.
Yeah. And if anyone listening, is an interior designer or an architect and interested in applying, feel free to look me up and shoot me an email.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. You are always the most delightful human to talk to.
Oh, too nice.
It's true. And you just have such a wide breadth of knowledge on, decorative arts and how it ties into interiors. And I always just love listening to you chat about it. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yes, I feel the same about you, and I love our conversations. And so thank you so much for inviting me on.
I wanted to say thank you to our lovely guests who joined me for season 1. Plus, thank you to every single one of you who tuned in for the last 8 weeks. It's been such a joy getting to speak with such an amazing variety of people in the interiors industry, and I've had so much fun interviewing everyone these past few weeks. I've also loved hearing everyone's feedback, so please keep DMing me at Ariel Okin. I love hearing what you all think of the episodes. We've already begun work on season 2 and 3, so stay tuned for more thoughtful and design-provoking conversations coming later this spring. Thank you so much, and happy holidays!